This one is about signs from my childhood that I was autistic. And in honor of my childhood video, I'm wearing my axolotl t-shirt. Axolotl drinking strawberry milk. It's super cute. I'm still in touch with my inner child. So there were lots of signs in my childhood that I was autistic. And looking back at my childhood as a late diagnosed autistic person, it all seems pretty obvious to me now. And there have been lots of aha moments and the whole range of emotions. Like some things I look back and I'm just like laughing. Oh my gosh, that was so funny and so obviously autistic. And then other things I'm, obviously angry about because and sad about because I did not receive the best treatment was misunderstood a lot due to that being unknown. And I don't know if it would have been any better if it had been known, but just given my circumstances. But yeah, I guess I'll never know. But anyway, signs from my childhood that I was autistic. I had the social, communication, and sensory things going on. The social thing got way more obvious as I got older, and I just think that generally children are a little more open and accepting, and they're all weird in general. So it may be less obvious. So I guess where I'll start is the funny parts that like communication. I don't think that I had any kind of delays exactly in my speech, but I had some unique speech things. I like to make up my own words for things. And I also would confuse meanings of words and switch the order, like reverse the order of words and sentences, or just get them mixed up and really shift the meaning of a sentence. So, like for example, I caught myself doing it the other day. I said, I meant to say, I'm not into being this way. And I said, I'm not being into this way. But I said it 3 times in a row and didn't catch myself. And so I would do that a lot as a kid also. But I just remember like thinking about it afterwards, after I would get in trouble and realizing that what I said didn't come out the way I meant it to because I would switch the order of the words unintentionally. But one funny thing was that I made up my own little language, essentially. It wasn't a Tolkien-esque language or anything, but I just kind of renamed things the way, and I would just call them the way I thought they should sound. And I was also ignored a lot. So if I liked something and I asked someone what it was and they didn't give me an answer, then I would just make up a name for it. And so I liked strawberries, and I knew the name for strawberries. I knew the name for strawberries, and I could pronounce strawberries, but I didn't think that sounded like a very good name for strawberries. So I called them hoo-hoos. Even though I could pronounce it, I could pronounce blackberries and blueberries, and so I just gave them their own name. They were special, so I gave them their own special name. And I called pepperoni Chuckles. Because I remember specifically asking what it was on my pizza that I liked, and nobody would tell me. So it came about as a result of my mom over baking a frozen pizza, and it was a cheap frozen pizza that had these kind of thick pepperonis on it, and they would shrink up into little cups when over baked. And they were really chewy also when over baked. And I thought they made a little sound that kind of sounded like Chuckles. That's just what I thought it sounded like. So that's what I called pepperonis. So, when I would ask for Chuckles on my pizza, nobody would know what I was talking about. And another funny thing, I randomly would memorize sets of numbers, and Pizza Hut happened to be like the first phone number that I memorized other than my grandparents. And the family thought it was so funny because they were looking it up to call in an order, and I just spouted off the number right off the top of my head, and they all just laughed and thought it was the funniest thing that I knew that number, and I had only heard them say it out loud like one time. But anyway, so yeah, it wasn't exactly like a full language. I had other words and would name things, like named a cat Tico just because I thought that sound described that cat. And so things like that I would do a lot. And I don't know, maybe all kids do stuff like that. But these are just some of, I'm not saying that all kids who are autistic experience these things, or all people who experience these things are autistic. These are just my experiences, and I happen to be. So, also with the communication thing, I would really get frustrated a lot because I would be misunderstood a lot as a kid, and I would get in trouble a lot because I was misunderstood. And I was also really clumsy. I would fall down and hurt myself, and I would, was my mom had lots of breakable things around the house, and I would, break, run into something and knock something breakable of hers off a shelf, and break things. And she was yelling at me very frequently, "You did that on purpose." Like, it seemed like every single time I bumped into something or tripped and fell, or anything, she would say, "You did that on purpose." And so I thought that, I knew that what I was doing was what was an accident, only I didn't think they were called accidents. I thought they were called on purpose, because I thought she was just describing what I was doing. And so I thought that accidents only applied to the times when you couldn't make it to the bathroom in time. But that if you, accidents other than that were unintentional were called on purpose. So the way I discovered that I was wrong in my assumption about that was, I was playing outside, throwing some sand with my little shovel, and my dog crossed the path as I was throwing the sand. And my brother, 9 years older than me, says, "Don't throw that sand, that it'll get in the dog's eyes." And I said, "But I did it on purpose," meaning by accident, because I didn't know the dog was going to run by at the time that I was throwing the sand. And so, of course, as siblings do when they're young, he ran and told on me. And I got in trouble for it. But I realized at that moment, from his reaction, that on purpose didn't mean what I thought it meant. And I was a little hurt and upset at that because I was like, you mean this whole time she's been telling me that I'm hurting myself on purpose, that I'm breaking her stuff on purpose? And, that was upsetting. So, and there had also been times when they would say, "Did you do that on purpose?" And I would be like, "Uh-huh," meaning by accident, and I would get in trouble. And um, I thought I was admitting to an accident. But anyway, I misunderstood that altogether. um, and there were, other communication issues as well. And I didn't have very good, I wasn't really in tune with my body and what it needed. Like, I had bladder control issues until I was 8 years old. And that is an embarrassing problem to have as a kid. And once you start school, especially, like, I didn't go to preschool. I just went straight on into kindergarten after I got old enough. But I also had a few meltdowns at school. And I remember one. A lot of times at school, I would go there and I would just start feeling bad. For no reason that I could explain, I would just start feeling bad. And looking back, I have a very good memory of the environments, like the classrooms which I was in. And I have a very good sensory memory, which you're not supposed to have a really long-term sensory memory, but I remember sensory information for a long time. And I remember that these times when I would just go to school and I would feel awful after I got there, it would be like whenever we were inside and the curtains were closed and we were under fluorescent lights. And there were two particular teachers that I had meltdowns in, each one of their, like, first grade and second grade. Those teachers both kept the blinds and windows closed and fluorescent lights on. There were some teachers later on that didn't do that. We had plenty of natural light at my school, and there were some teachers that would leave the windows open and the blinds open so to let their natural light in. But these teachers didn't. And I would also be, it would be like fluorescent lights, and then we'd go to PE and everybody would be screaming, and we would be having to do some sort of active little, like whether it was kickball or running. They actually made us exercise like doing little 50-yard dash or whatever. And of that, just being in that environment where you're under fluorescent lights, then going outside under the bright sunlight and in the Alabama heat, having to run and getting all sweaty and uncomfortable, and all the kids screaming. And then by recess, I had just had it. And lunch, of course, you go to lunch and everybody's like yelling in the lunchroom, and you're doing the thing. We all did. But so by recess, I would usually just be really done with, like, kids can be so loud. And so I remember one time on the playground, I had a meltdown, and it was like someone just flipped a switch, and I just screaming, running like I was gonna get off the playground, and I don't know where I was running to, out into traffic apparently. But there was a chain link fence, and I ran straight up to that chain link fence, and I was like the lady on Terminator, just like, let me out, and screaming. But I don't even know if I was vocalizing the let me out part. I just remember screaming, like, nothing intelligible, is that the right word, coming out of my mouth anyway. But yeah, so, and the teachers were like alarmed, and the kids were alarmed, like they thought something happened, but they just didn't know what happened. Like they thought that's, something bad happened to me to set me off, instead of it just being like a buildup of different things over the day. And, that one I remember specifically, it had just been a lot of stuff building up that entire day. So, and yeah, I would draw a lot when I was a kid, and so I didn't really have that much many social problems. But I do remember that I liked my toys in a very particular order, and I wasn't like a super clean. I've never been like, scrub the tile with a toothbrush kind of person, unless I was really trying to get a deposit back. But like I was really organized with my toys and stuff, and it might have been not apparent to everyone, but it was an order that I knew. And so when other kids would come over, my mom would rarely invite people over, but sometimes she had to babysit her friends' kids, and so they'd come over, and they were just little tornadoes, and they would come in and they would color my coloring book and all scribbly, and I hated that. It's like they're just ruining a page in my coloring book, and then they're like getting all my toys off the shelf and into the floor, and oh my gosh, I hated that. And I didn't mind the kids, I just didn't like the destruction that they left behind. It irritated me. And for one of my birthday parties, she invited some kids, and they were at my house. And the entire birthday party of mine, I'm just confiscating toys from kids and putting them back on the shelf where they belong. And since my mom liked her breakable antique things, she had this weird little George and Martha Washington doll pair on one of my top shelves. And some kid managed to get those down. And so I knew that I wasn't allowed to play with those and that they were fragile. So I just delicately took them away from that girl. And I went to my mom in the room with all the ladies, and I said, Susan was going to play with these, so you might want to keep them until it's over. Very matter-of-factly. I looked, I think I got a few weird looks, and then just went back to confiscating toys. And then another friend's birthday party at her house, her friend, she was one of the friends that would destroy my room when she came over. Her room was covered in toys. It was just mass destruction. So during her birthday party, I organized her room for her while the kids were having fun and eating cake and doing stuff. I'm sure I didn't miss out on the cake altogether, but I was organizing her room. So, I'm sure there wasn't anything weird about that at all, but things like that, I look back on and I'm like, oh wow, that was super obvious. In addition to the just other things that were like sensory issues. Like I was very, very uncomfortable in most of the clothes that, or anything but pajamas, anything but cotton. And it had to be really soft cotton. It couldn't be any of that starched stuff. And so I had sensory issues with sounds and the fluorescent lights at school. And I don't remember being extremely aware of tastes and smells, but I was a picky eater. I also don't know if that was circumstantial because my mom did not give me the best options. I liked things that most kids like, like chicken nuggets and macaroni and cheese and peanut butter and jelly and mashed potatoes or stuff like that, but she would give me weird stuff like deviled ham sandwiches and pimento loaf sandwiches, or and we had like black-eyed peas and creamed corn and cornbread for dinner nearly every night because her parents were raised a vegetable garden, huge vegetable garden every summer, and those were the two main crops. That is the worst way to prepare corn, if you ask me. But so I didn't really have a lot of things to choose from. So yeah, she would tell everyone I was a picky eater, but I just didn't like the food that she chose for me. So and I played alone a lot because my brothers didn't really want to have anything to do with me. They're 8 and 9 years older than me, and they just acted like I was the most annoying thing in the world, and I might have been, I don't know. But so I played alone a lot, and I always had animals to keep me company, and so I've always like had a connection with animals. And so my special interest when I was a kid, major special interest, was cats. I absolutely loved cats, and I have my entire room decorated in cats, like a cat comforter, pillow shams, and curtains, and a few big posters of cats on my wall. And but I loved other animals too. I had like a Ranger Rick magazine subscription, and you would get the little posters out of that and put up, if it's like a sloth or whatever, I would have those kinds of things on my walls. And I would love to go outside and just lay in the grass at like eye level and just watch all the little things that were going on in the grass. And we didn't have like any kind of really nice rolled out turf lawn. It was out in the middle of nowhere, and it was just basically whatever sprouted. And there were lots of bugs. So I would lay at eye level and watch the bugs. And I remember the first time I realized that it was just like, I didn't know the word, obviously, but it was a microcosm, essentially, of what was going on above, and of the big world, and all these little ants and bugs were just going about their little daily lives around the grass, just like, people maneuvering around trees or whatever. And I was so excited, and I went to tell my mom, did you know there's a whole other world in the grass? And she is just like, what are you talking about? Kids are so imaginative. And I'm like, no, there's like a little world down there with like ants and bugs and she didn't get it, and I don't think she would have been too impressed anyway. But I loved doing that and collecting little different specimens of different plants and mushrooms and things like that. So yeah, I also I was always very aware of death from a very young age because we did live in the country, and both my grandparents had farms. One raised cattle and chickens for food, and the other grew vegetables, but they had lots of barn cats and lived by a highway. So, um, and so I knew about death pretty early on. And I remember this one, and my mom watched soap operas also. So, you know about things from soap operas when you're a kid and your mother watches them. And so one of my friends came over, and the same one that liked to be destructive in my room was going through my closet, and she comes across this Barbie doll in a shoebox, and she's like, "Why's she in here?" And I said, "Oh, she died." She was like, "You're not supposed to play like that." And I was like, "What?" "She's gonna come back in a couple of weeks." Because that's what would happen on Days of Our Lives. And I would just kind of, reenact stuff that I saw on TV. So, yeah. But anyway, I can't think of anything specifically otherwise. Other than just in general, like different sensory things, lots of different sensory things, and lots of misunderstandings, lots of times when I, didn't want to be hugged by somebody, and I was forced to hug them, and it was all totally ick, and just full of things like that, uncomfortable situations, and not being really in touch with my body and what it was telling me I needed. Like, I had scheduled meal times, so I didn't, have to think about, like, am I hungry yet? I didn't have to think about that until I was all on my own. But yeah, just showed lots of signs, and I was a pretty good student, except for those 2 years when I had the teachers that had the awful classroom environment. That environment interfered with everything, and they also didn't have, they weren't really good teachers. I can remember pretty well. I'm just like, they just did not really have very good control over their class, and they didn't do a very good job of teaching, and their environment was awful, and I think they were just kind of in it to have the summers off. So anyway, yeah, lots of things from my childhood that were signs that I guess just looking back on those make a lot of sense now.